That's the whole key. These vision skills are learned. Nobody's born knowing how to use your arms, your legs, your hands, or your vision system. And the cool part about neuroplasticity is you can relearn at any age. You can learn or relearn at any age through Hebb's law of creating pathways in your brain. The bad part about neuroplasticity is you have to learn it the first time. And the two biggest groups we work with, without question, are bright kids who aren't showing the rest of the world how bright they are, and they often have other labels put on that. We'll talk about that later. But then the second group is brain injury. 70 to 90% of any acquired brain injury will have an impact on the ambient visual system. And they go to the eye doctor and they check your focal visual system and they say you're fine, but yet your balance is off. You can't drive a car. You get dizzy. You get headaches. You're photosensitive. So all those things, and those are all ambient vision problems. And to the best of my knowledge, we're the only doctor in Kentucky who's doing ambient vision testing and treating.
All right, we are here with Dr. Richard Graebe of Neuro-Visual Performance Institute in Versailles, Kentucky. Thank you for being here. Dr. Graebe, I'm going to read a quick bio. This is just a snippet. I know you have a long resume of expertise. We can get into a little bit of that, but you're a behavioral and neuro-rehabilitation optometrist and learning expert. You've been in private practice for more than 35 years, offering vision therapy and neuro-rehabilitation services for patients of all ages, helping struggling learners improve their reading and love of learning, athletes advance their recognition and reaction times, and even patients who were told they would never drive. You're one of a select group of international optometrists who have completed board certification in vision therapy, pediatric developmental vision care, and vision rehabilitation with the College of Optometrists in Vision Development. That's all impressive. Is there anything else that you wanted to add to that?
No, just over 40 years now. Just been doing it even longer at that too. But no, thank you. It's not about me.
Well, I'm just so glad to have you on. We met, and I don't know if you remember, my wife and I attended a presentation that you gave at your clinic in Versailles, Kentucky I think it was 2016.
Yeah.
And I think it was a light therapy you were talking about, or the importance of light on the eyes. And we walked away from that with our eyes open, so to speak. So it's just a very interesting conversation, and so glad to have you back. So maybe you just want to talk a little bit about what you do, the kinds of assessments you do, the vision therapy, and you talk with parents all the time, so you can kind of steer this, I think, a lot better than I could with my questions.
Well, all right, okay, great. Yeah, one of the biggest things I always start with is, most people aren't aware there's really 4 different phases to vision. And the only one that really gets tested, there's only one of those gets tested on general eye exams. What happens, we need to get a clear image, and that eye doctors, myself included, our school training is awesome in that. We're very good about, do you need glasses to help you see more clearly? And are your eyes healthy? And that we're very good at that. But after you get the clear image, your brain has to process what you're seeing. And there's ambient and there's focal processing both. And the only thing we're really taught about in school of any significance is focal processing. And I'll get back to what both of those are, but then it's just, you have to get a clear image, process with your vision, then you have to integrate with your other senses. If you tip to the side, your spine's telling your brain, we're tipped to the right. Your vestibular system says we're tipped to the right. Your vision says, yes, we're tipped to the right. And they're all in agreement. And then it's like, yeah, this makes sense. So let's move forward. So get a clear image, process, integrate with other senses, then you act. You do your motor planning and then you act. And then it's a feedback loop. As you're acting, you're getting feedback and say, okay, how do I do that different? And that's the whole key. These vision skills are learned. Nobody's born knowing how to use your arms, your legs, your hands, or your vision system. And the cool part about neuroplasticity is you can relearn at any age. You can learn or relearn at any age through Hebb's law of creating pathways in your brain. The bad part about neuroplasticity is you have to learn it the first time. And the two biggest groups we work with, without question, are bright kids who aren't showing the rest of the world how bright they are. And they often have other labels put on that. We'll talk about that later. But then the second group is brain injury. 70 to 90% of any acquired brain injury will have an impact on the ambient visual system. And they go to the eye doctor and they check your focal visual system and they say you're fine, but yet your balance is off. You can't drive a car. You get dizzy. You get headaches. You're photosensitive. So all those things, and those are all ambient vision problems. And to the best of my knowledge, we're the only doctor in Kentucky who's doing ambient vision testing and treating. And that kind of carries over to a lot of other states too, because it's a very small group are doing that. And the good news, the information is getting out there, but it's going to take a good while for that to get into regular care and things like that too. And not everybody wants to do what I do. Not every eye doctor doesn't want to do that. So I understand why everybody's not doing that. But when you understand with that model, get a clear image, process vision, integrate with other senses, and act. I've not yet met a patient in 40 years that I can't say, here's where your problem is, and here's what we need to do to improve it. And our average patient, and it was 30 sessions with us, will have over 3.5 year jump on their skill levels. And you just made a permanent pathway in the brain, just like when you learn to walk and talk. And I think it's just the coolest thing how the brain works. Once you get that pathway, it's there. I haven't been on a bike for 15 to 20 years, but I could go jump on a bike, would not even think about it because years ago I created that pathway. And so that's what happens. Some of these kids, when they're learning, I say they create a country road pathway, which is great when everything's slow and easy and they can touch things and do this. But then they start catching balls, riding bikes, driving cars, reading books, and they go, I can't do this. And that's why when you go that learn to read, read to learn, that third to fourth grade, you go, what's going on? And they just often say, try harder. You're not working hard, but they're, working their tails off. It's just they don't have the skills that they need. I use a simple analogy of I said, think instead of being a learning or reading problem, if it's a running problem, and we do our test and see their skills aren't where they should be. It's like a kid's running a race and 10-pound shoes, 20-pound shoes, 30-pound shoes, how, depending on the deficits they have. And we have programs to make the shoes lighter in that analogy. So kind of like this. And I always tell everybody, don't read anything into what I'm saying here, because I think all of these diagnoses are fully legitimate. But when you look at things like dyslexia, ADHD, auditory processing, oppositional defiant disorder, OCD, it's a series of behaviors. You can't do a single quantitative blood test to say this. And I love that. I love and hate the saying labels are for cans, not for kids. Because I don't mind the label. It tells me dyslexic, your intelligence level is up there, but your reading level's not. And so that's kind of what we look for. But let's say dyslexia was a running condition. And we do the test and we say, you have 30-pound shoes on your feet. I said, let's get these skills fixed and let's make those shoes lighter. Let's see if you still are a quote dyslexic runner. Do you still have those reading problems or running problems, depending on the analogy there? And more often than not, we don't. But I have never said we cure dyslexia, we cure ADHD, and I never will say that. But I just think there's so many. I'm a huge fan of interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary groups, because there's no one group that has all the answers, period. And that's why I think I just love working with other professionals, because the simple thing, we're all smarter than one of us, however you want to say that. And just I can't be an expert in all those other areas. So I love hearing what other professionals like. What's your thoughts? What's your thought? And kind of like the Mayo Clinic, all these places where they don't really care who gets the credit. They work as a team and go, well, who should we work with first? Or what's the primary thing we should focus on? And quite often, vision's just such a dominant sense. I mean, it's 70% of what we process sitting around is coming through the visual system, but we're not aware of most of what's coming in. School's more like 85% is visual. And so what happens if you only look at certain areas, you don't know what's good or what's bad. And so, like, for example, we'll do tests. We can say, read a paragraph. When you're done reading, it will show in real time how your right eye moved, left eye moved, how many times you lost your place, or regressions where you had to go back and find over with that too. And then it will talk about the disparity, fixation disparity. Are the two eyes, are they pointed together or not pointed together? And the big thing with reading, in the distance, everywhere we look, our eyes go right, they go left, they go up, they go down. But up close, you have to converge your eyes and turn them in. And so as you turn your eyes in like that, you're going to sit here and you have to converge your eyes in. And the part of your eye that can see 20/20 is the macula. It's about the size of a ballpoint pen opening. So what you're having to do reading, you're having to take a laser pointer from your right eye, left eye equivalently, and laser point those at the letter. A lens inside the eye has to flex and focus to get your distance vision now clear up close. Then you have to keep those together and in focus as you move across the page. Then you phonetically decode the words. You say those words in your head. You process them auditorily. Then the auditory visual integration, you turn that into a visual image. And when all of those things are working great without any energy or stress, they go, oh, this is like a movie in my head. But otherwise, I tell parents, it's like trying to read a book with every fourth word is a new foreign language. you could do it, but it's exhausting. And the longer the book, the more trouble. Just like with the back to the heavy shoe analogy, I'm fine, walking to the front desk in an office with heavy shoes. I could even, run a block maybe but I'd be winded. But then when you have to run further, you're going to start not only get tired, but you're going to fall behind. And that's what we're seeing happen. That learn to read, read to learn. These kids, that you start seeing the performance gaps grows and grows and grows with that as well. And so, and when we do these testing, like we test how far can you turn your eyes in. We do body testing. You can stand on a pressure plate, and it measures within centimeters how much body sway or instability you have. And we can say, is that from a vestibular problem, from a vision problem, from a proprioceptive problem? Something kind of cool, Microsoft came up with socks last year that have receptors on the feet. And as you're not just standing, but now as you're walking, it will measure the weight distribution across your feet. And then it will calculate the center of mass of the body and center of gravity of the body. And then it calculates, is there a prism that we can put in the lenses that would have those two merge and be one? And when those are in equal, that's when that patient is going to have stability. And so we can put the prism on right then and say, let's do it again. And we go, wow, look how much more stable that is. And if that's the case, we can, write on prescription they can take to their eye doctor and go, put this in your glasses. It can help with the stabilization of those. And we use prisms like that for toe walkers. Prisms can be very powerful for the autism population. Just a lot of them, can have difficulties in that too. So there's so many things that we do. When you talked about light therapy, we talked about that when you were in 2016, and that's probably one of the more powerful tools we have. There's a receptor in the eye that we didn't know was there till around 2002. And the first two receptors, the discoverer said, let's call that rods and cones. I go, thank you very much. Well, this guy discovered, he said, let's call it intrinsically photosensitive ganglion cell receptor. So I just call it the third receptor. But that receptor has absolutely nothing to do with our actual ability to see, but it's regulating light, through the day to day. I think everybody's heard by now, don't look at screens before bed. The blue light suppresses melatonin. That's the pathway that creates that. That also, when people get seasonal affective disorder, that's the pathway where that originates. So it goes from there to the pineal gland, which controls serotonin, melatonin output. And so that receptor responds to quantity of light and then also to wavelengths of light. And we perceive different wavelengths as different colors. So if I was colorblind and you weren't, you may say the blue lens and I may say it looks green to me. It doesn't matter what color I see it, it's the energy that wavelength has that creates the response. And so it's fascinating, just the whole field of light therapy with what they call photobiomodulation, just light as it impacts your body and health. And virtually every cell in your body has chromophores, which will respond differently to different wavelengths of light. And it's just like, why is that? And it's just like, no one really fully understands that at this point, but it's kind of like one of the primary reasons you need to get outdoors on a regular basis. It's something I saw just last week, I was reading, it said something like 29% of kids get less outdoor time than prisoners. It's just like, and that's when they need it the most, in the early childhood. And we're kind of unfortunately told, run from the sun, it's dangerous, this and that, and like everything, moderation. But what that can do for our health is amazing.
I'm glad you brought that up, because
Yeah.
that was one of the takeaways that I do remember from that 2016 presentation. And
Yeah.
I've tried to tell my kids that from time to time. I don't know if they
Yeah.
believe me, but now I can give
Yeah.
them the proof.
Well, and here, even just like in this country, the last 20 years, we've had a 30% jump in kids becoming nearsighted. And without question, it's screens. There's no question on that. So this close work, it takes us roughly mid-teens to develop adult level visual skills. Like I said, those are learned. And so as the brain's developing, vision skills are developing along with it as we interact with the world, and they get more precise, more precise, more precise. But what happens with this, when they're learning these skills, if your brain's developing, you have all these open pathways. So these young kids can go, got it, got it, got it. The brain's fully developed. You start pruning away the pathways we're have not used. So that's why the myth that you can't do things at any age is because, yeah, I don't have as many open pathways. I sit down next to a 12-year-old learn a new computer program. They're going to be ticking away, and I'm just going, okay, step one. But the difference is I have that prefrontal cortex that will tell me I need to be doing this. So, but going back to the lights in the outdoors, Kids who, if one parent's nearsighted, you're 40% more likely to be nearsighted. Two parents, you're 60%. Kids who move regularly are 4 to 10% less likely to be nearsighted. Kids who spend time outdoors on a regular basis are 45% less likely to become nearsighted. And just from a standpoint, we know keeping peripheral blur on the retina will slow nearsighted progression. If I'm in a room, first, I'm not in natural light, I'm in artificial light, which has a lot of things, but then the walls aren't far enough to be blurred. So I don't have peripheral blur on my retina. As soon as I step outside, a tree over in the distance and a barn in the distance are in my periphery, and they're blurred. So I have peripheral blur when I'm on the retina, when I step on the retina, when I go outside. The other thing is no kid goes out and just stands in the yard. They go out and they are moving. They're riding their bikes, they're playing ball, they're doing those things. So it's so much reason, because when they're doing all this near point stress, I said, put those two things together. The hardest thing we have to do is look at things up close. It takes up to mid-teens to develop adult level visual skills. And what do we ask young kids to do all day? Is sit still indoors and stare at things up close. And they're now everybody's on, here's your Chromebook, here's everything, all the lessons are being done on screens. And so what happens is that stress gives kids three choices. They go, this is too hard, I'm not going to do it. I'll do it, but a simple 20-minute homework assignment turns into the 2-hour homework wars. Or three, you rob Peter in the distance to pay Paul up close. And then the next thing you know, it's like, I can't see the board. And then you go see our general optometrists, we're trained to say, well, you need glasses to see in the distance. It's like, oh, sweet. You put them on, instantly you can see. And the next thing you know is you're locked into those. My
So
own
let me,
personal story. Yeah.
sorry,
I'll
let
tell
me
you
just,
my personal story. Go ahead.
oh,
Well,
sorry, I didn't
from
want to
17,
interrupt there. I wanted to make sure I recap, because you've laid
yeah,
out so much good information. So what you're saying is that there is a genetic predisposition to nearsighted or
100%,
farsightedness.
yes.
But once you're
Right.
born, those skills they're developed throughout your childhood. And so it's not something that is set from childhood, and it's something that can be strengthened. And the
Yeah.
longer that you go without strengthening or developing those, the more
Yeah.
problems that it's causing. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, to a degree, this, when I say the skills, I'm talking about how well and how precisely you point, focus, track, move, those kind of things. Not so much the actual seeing, but the skills. If you're not having good tracking skills, excuse me, near point work is going to be more a stress for that person. So it's your response to the stress. Like some people like, oh, I get a headache when I'm stressed. Other people go, oh, I get a stomach ache. That's, I think, those genetic predispositions. And the thing that I will tell you that kind of what we're taught in school should always be, and this I think is healthcare 101, everything you're taught in school should be truth little t, not truth capital T. Absolutely. Here's the way it is. I was nearsighted from 17 till 61. I did syntonics, light therapy through my vision system. I'm not nearsighted now. And so it's just an instance of, and I've been at conferences where in as little under 10 minutes, we're all eye doctors. They have us do certain body movements along with a couple of certain, eye movements. And most all of us are seeing, about 80% of us, we're seeing 2 to 3 lines further down instantly. And it's like,
That's
we all look at
incredible.
each other, go, no, yeah, this is impossible, because that's our training says, no, 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 that doesn't happen. But it did, so my point, and that's the problem I see when it's all said and done, is we tend, Western medicine is really based completely on Newtonian physics. Everything has a mass, a structure, a size, a volume. And when you start understanding things from a quantum physics standpoint, and I'm not the expert in that, but I understand the energy and the change in energy creates the output, and that's, to me, and it's kind of, again, why do we have all these receptors in our eye, and why do we have these receptors in our body for light? And one thing related to this, I'm a huge fan of red light therapy, and I will tell you, there's over 50,000 peer-reviewed studies on red light therapy with zero complications. So you can get a $40 light, red near infrared light, that will last you probably for 20 years. And I'll recommend the book. It's called Red Light Therapy: Miracle Medicine by Mark Sloan. And that's probably I recommend that for most all my patients. It's the best intro book to red light therapy that I found. You can get deep in the woods. There's people, their whole life is on red light therapy, but red light therapy will stimulate blood flow, it cuts inflammation, and it stimulates mitochondrial function. And so every cell in our body has mitochondria, and the mitochondria is what creates the energy for the cell to do its function and for the cell to heal itself. And working with a lot of athletes, I can tell you that virtually every pro team out there has red light therapy beds for their athletes, college and up, because they can get their players recovered and back on the field faster. If you did a slight little cut on one hand and did the same on the other, put red light on the one side, it would heal faster. And there's so much evidence, and we now know why and how it works. And so now it's like it's okay, but you don't hear a lot of people promoting it because you buy a $40 light and you're fine. I mean, you can get a $10,000 bed too, but the difference is the $40 light, you're hitting a small area of the bed. You can get all area at once. You can hit more cells in a shorter time period. But in the book, it explains red light therapy is based on the wattage of the light and the duration of the time. Any red light you get is fine. I recommend, and I have no affiliation with this company, but I recommend the company Hooga, Hooga. And you can get their Hooga light. You can get it on Amazon for $40. And then you can get a bigger box with more lights for $300 and more lights for $900. So it just, you can get whole body or whatever with that too. So depending on what your goal, what you're shooting for, but truly the $40 light that's what I recommend everybody start with that. And if you really get into it, want to do more, go for it. I mean, I have a lot of those things, but when I'm on computer, I just have a red light, shining on the back of my neck with the cerebellum area with that too. Just I go, and you can't overdo it. So if I go, oh, I wanted to do 10 minutes of red light and I fell asleep and I got 2 hours worth, I go, that's fine. I tell people in real simple terms, think of it like a 10-ounce glass. Once you fill it up, that's all you're going to get, and the rest is just going to overflow. The light won't make the mess that the water will. So that's the advantage. But I think I tell everybody, regardless of what their case is when they come and see them, I tell them about that because I think that's just such an important thing for everybody to know. You go for a run, your knee feels a little funky, put red light on it, it'll feel better. You feel like you're getting a headache, put just shine across there, it'll feel better with that
Oh,
too. So more often than not. So simple, easy solution, and the red and near infrared both work together. They work the same. Excuse me. The difference is the red light won't go as deep. The near infrared will go deeper. So that's why I like the Hooga red / near infrared. For it's $40 plus or minus $1 or $2 on Amazon when it's on sale, and it will just look like a little floodlight that's on a cord with an on-off switch, and just keep it by your chair. So it's handy. You just reach down, grab what we need, and it's really phenomenal. Near infrared is phenomenal for helping with gut health, increasing gut flora. I mean, I tell people all the time I'm a big fan of no extra time. Do things that don't take extra time. So you say, hey, I'm gonna watch this Netflix movie. Well, just pull your shirt up and paint your belly with the red light while you're doing it, that too. And you can kind of help your gut health without disrupting anything else you're doing. And
that is
so there's
so
just no,
interesting.
yeah,
That's a huge tip for listeners. And
yeah.
this can be done. This is all ages. Anybody can do this.
100%. My 90-year-old father-in-law is using red light on a regular basis. We have patients in from really, we kind of cradle to grave. We have infants. We have 93-year-olds in our practice. And, I'm always about the only concern I would ever have, and it's kind of still questionable if it's a concern at all. If someone has some kind of tumor or cancer or growth, you may not want to red light to that area because would that potentially stimulate the growth of that? And the answer is maybe at this point. So, but for just general healthy people, there really are no contraindications. That's why I think the book's a great resource to sort of, well, look, what should I be concerned? And, kind of explains why. And he's a healthcare writer, researcher, and he's Mark Sloan is the author of that. He basically does such a good job of taking all these complex studies and put them down into there. But he does have bibliographies if somebody wants to go, I want to delve deeper. And there's a Dr. Hamblin at Harvard he's written an entire textbook on red light therapy, which if somebody really wants to get into it, go for that. Another book I'd recommend for light therapies in general, if you want to get is it's either light therapy or light therapies. I don't know, but it's by Anadi Martel, Anadimartel. And Anadi's a PhD in physics, but one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. He's just very humble, and he's just seeking truth. That's for him. He doesn't care what the answer is. He just wants to know what is truth. And so he wrote this book, and he breaks light into 4 categories. We use light for seeing, and everybody can understand that. That syntonic pathway, that receptor in the eye, is what we call SYN tonic. That syntonic pathway is that receptor in the eye that responds to that. He has a whole chapter just for that. And the bulk of the book is about photobiomodulation, the way light affects bodily functions. And then he gets into light as a way to raise spiritual or consciousness, and then he has an entire chapter that's just about what's the best light for your home and office for health and for productivity and why. And so at the end, he has here's some light therapy devices that are out there. And the book's relative, I think it's probably 5 years old now or something. So it's still pretty current on all that, but it's just the other stuff. It's just a great resource for someone who wants to delve deeper into how can I create this homeostasis or balance in my body without having to put anything into it other than just the natural light. But that's again, my my key is from simplicity. We were created and made to be outdoors, and we've got away from that. And even we used to have incandescent lights that puts off infrared, which infrared will help stimulate blood flow. One of the studies, they killed rats, heart stopped, blood stopped. They shine near infrared on the blood vessels afterwards, and the blood would start flowing after the animal was dead. And so we know oxygenated red blood cells will absorb near infrared light. No one still knows exactly. That's kind of a newer thing. It's like, what just happened there? And the obvious thing from not Newton, but from quantum physics, you go, well, the light photonic energy turned into kinetic energy that's about as complex physics as I would get that too. But that's the logical thing. But it's just like, that should tell us something. And so much of our blood is in these little microcapillaries. And so we want to do movement to create those. And so if you don't have the movement, the heart isn't strong enough to pump through and come back. And that's as we get older, we get these, circulation problems in our ankles. Well, one, get your ankles up, but also, pump your feet, also do red light therapy on it. There's so many things you can do to slow these processes down. I mean, it's inevitable. We're going to, go downhill over time, but it's just much you could do to kind of help for that. And that's kind of my thing, is just how can we maximize performance? And that's why the visual system is just, the complexity and the just the value the visual system has and what we're doing. I mean, here's kind of the way I always tell people in the beginning, there's 1.9 million fibers coming out of each eye. I could tell you that I still can't wrap my head around that. 70 to 90% of the pathways in the brain are involved in vision directly or indirectly. As we're sitting here, 70% of what we process is vision. School is 85%. And then, in 1840, they stuck an eye chart on the wall, and we're still using that as the gold standard. It's crazy. There's actually 17 different, I think there's more, but at least 17 different visual skills that everybody agrees on. And the only one that gets tested on eye exams is what's your distant static acuity. And just because you can see well in the distance doesn't mean you're going to perform well up close, and doesn't mean you can go from the desk to desk to board all day long. And that's the other part. I use a simple concept I call brain dimes. I said everybody's brain has $1 worth of dimes to spend. That's it. We only have so much brain power, brain energy. And so what happens is these young kids, like a kid learning to walk, is going, man, walking across the room is cool, but it's taking 60 cents of my brain dime when I'm learning it. But the brain's going, yeah, but walking's cool. So let's create a pathway for this so we don't have to spend brain dimes. And that's Hebb's law, nerves that fire together, wire together. And so that's kind of anything we learn to do well, walking, talking, riding a bike, driving a car, signing your name. That's what we're doing. We're creating those pathways. And that's the thing is we just simply, I don't care, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, vision therapy. We basically are just creating an environment where the brain gets a meaningful experience. Go, oh, I got it. Then you repeat it, and then it will create the pathways. And once your brain goes, that's helpful information, let's create a pathway for that. And I tell people all the time, if you bring a kid home from the hospital, I'm 99% certain that kid is going to learn to walk and talk, because they'll figure out that's helpful for me to learn how to do that. So I want to create a pathway. And the same thing too, that's what we're doing in any of these therapies. We're just giving them that information, and then they can go, oh, I see what I'm supposed to do. And I love simple analogies. I said, instead of vision skills, it's piano skills. I said, real world, you're trying to learn to play piano when your keyboard's turned off. Effectively, all we can do is turn the keyboard on. We can't do the work for them. And that's the whole key in all this. The magic on our success is really the patient's brain. I mean, we're just coaches and facilitators and all this. We just give them the information they need. And then they go, oh, thanks very much. I got this. And then once we get it embedded, and that's the biggest problem I see in any therapy out there, there should be 3 phases to therapy. First third, you're kind of figuring out what works and doesn't work for that patient. middle third, you're sitting there going, oh, look, these numbers are better, scores are better. And the final third is when you embed it and make these permanent pathways in the brain. And the problem is so many times in therapy, I say, oh, you have good scores, you're fine. And that's the problem when we test people. We're just saying you're able to do that. We don't know how many brain times are you spending to do that. Can you do that all day long? I don't know. When I just did the test, well, we kind of have a two-phase testing process. The first phase, we just get the quantity. The second phase, we get more the quality. Can you hold it? Can you endure it? Is it automatic enough that you can apply it to your day-to-day activities? With that too.
It this is this is amazing information. I'm trying to take some notes and I have about 100 questions, but I just kind of want to let you just go with this. But
Yeah,
one question that pops into my mind
yeah,
is this seems like these techniques, this approach is because it's developmental helps everybody. Are
100%.
there who are the clients that you work with, or
Yeah,
how do they find you, and why are they seeking vision therapy if everybody can benefit from this?
right.
Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, we work with special needs kids. We work with pro athletes. We work with everywhere in between. So again, I 100% saying anyone can benefit from that. I always say for every patient I see of any level, I really comes down to one question. It's what do you need to do in your world, or what do you feel you're capable of? What a parent says, my child, here's their potential. And my question is, how's your performance matching up to that potential in school, in sports, in life in general, with that. And so, we find most of our patients now, having done this long enough, and we take patients, can call us directly, but without question, the biggest number of patients are referrals. Neurologists after brain injury go, we don't know what to do. Could you take care of this? We have optometrists, we have OTs, we have PTs, we have pediatricians. But then the biggest for us is just still word of mouth. Helps one kid, they tell their friend, and just the networking, is probably our biggest over the years with that too. And like we were talking earlier, it's like we've never really marketed. And 8 years ago, I knew we had over 300 zip codes, and that's why I said we have to get this out there. But my two biggest avatars or groups that I'm going after are bright kids who aren't showing the rest of the world how bright they are, and the brain injury patients. We do the others. I'd say probably 60% of our patients are bright kids, not showing the rest of the world how they do. And that's what got me into this field. Excuse me. That's my heartstrings is kids.
How does that show up in bright kids when they're
What are
struggling, when they're
the
not
base?
achieving their potential, like you said?
Yeah,
How does that? What are parents coming in and saying?
yeah.
How are they
You know,
describing that?
it could be I can't get them. They just don't like reading. I have to force them to read. They get headaches when they read. They fall asleep. Fatigue. They're wiped out. Because when you overwork the smooth muscles of the eye, you don't get like tired, weak, like their skeletal muscles. You're going to sit here and go, I'm getting headaches above my brows, or you start getting sleepy, fatigue, those kind of things. But ultimately, it's just what happens is you just see as they go up, you often see these grades, just the grade levels go up, and the grade scores start going down. It's just hard to think about. That's why I love the heavy shoe analogy. You're starting to fall behind as the race goes deeper and deeper. And initially, you just read a page or two, then you read the rest as a class. Then you go, oh, I have a chapter by myself. Now I have 5 chapters by myself. And that's where they start having those kind of problems. And kind of related to that, what the schools are going to do, if we go back to the race analogy, say you're starting to fall behind in the race, come on, get in our golf cart, we'll get you caught up. And they get you caught up, they push you back out. And then what happens is you fall behind again, they get you back in the golf cart, and they do that enough times, and they go, tell you what, you just run a half a lap, the rest of us run a full lap. Whereas anything that has the word therapy at the end of it, or training at the end of it, is going to focus more on let's make your shoes lighter. And then that kid puts the same effort, they start catching people, then they start passing people. And the thing I love, so many of our young kids, their day is I go to school, I get my homework done, and it's time for bed. And the only time they get to be a kid is on the weekend. And the thing I absolutely love about what we do is these kids are getting their stuff done quicker and easier, and they have more time to do what they want to do. And interestingly enough, a lot of times what they choose to do after the skills are like, I'll read a book. And you think they just don't want anything to do with books. And it's just so cool because if you have those reading skills, you can teach yourself anything, with that too. There's always resources out there for that. And, it is just an instance. Some of the statistics, Margaret Livingstone's a PhD researcher at Harvard, and she works in a Nobel Prize winning lab. So she's got a lot of clout behind what she does, but she did a study. And my point is there's no optometrist in this, but her study showed if you look at the general populations, 10 to 25% are going to have some kind of binocular vision problem where the eyes aren't working as a team with that. You look at individuals with reading problems, it's 75%. And the sad part, you look at juvenile delinquent prison populations, it's 90%. And so, and the heartbreaking thing for me, my sister-in-law was a reading specialist in one of the schools here in Kentucky. And she basically said the prison board would call, she works with second graders. The prison board would call to see how many kids were in the reading recovery program in order to make an estimate on how many prison beds are going to need later down the road. And it just breaks your heart when you see that. And it's just, and that does not mean if you have a binocular vision problem, you're going to go that road, but you can kind of common sense and go, it's like, don't like the school, don't like the reading, I'll go hang this. And, I've been there, done that. I look at a couple, when I was growing up, it's like a couple summers, like, oh, if I would have stayed with this group, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. So we just aren't making the best decisions through our youth with that too. And so, but if school's easy and fun, you go, oh yeah, cool, I'll do that. You enjoy it, and you get that avoidance of the things that are just, this is just too hard, and especially when you're trying and nobody's giving you credit for trying. It just has so frustrating for these kids.
There's more and more talk, as you know, about the effects of screens with kids. Kids are spending more time on screens.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this is talked about a lot, and maybe you don't want to
Right.
spend too much time on
No,
this, but
no.
from your perspective, is the draw to screens, is that due to sensitivity to light and not having developed these other skills, or does it create that? Or why are some kids really drawn to screens intently and others are maybe
Yeah,
more, it's easier for them to go outside and do these other
yeah.
things?
Well, it's kind of chicken egg. It's a big question, there, which comes first. It's like, I don't have these skills to judge space and distance, because when you're walking, your feet are on the ground, your body's moving, all that helps tell you where you are in space. But then ultimately, through when we get old, through the developmental, young child, first thing, everything's taste and smell, then it's all touch and feel, then it gets to be vision, with that too. So what happens is these kids who aren't comfortable moving through space will live in a two-dimensional world. And the flip side, it's a two-way street. If you sit here, and I always say, it's a big, you kind of brought up this brings up the thing. My big question is always want to get to the root cause of things. Again, like we said earlier, we label things constantly. You have to have an international classification of disease, ICD-10 code for any disease or any condition, but that doesn't always meet the person well. I always say we should have an ICD code. In our office, we call it AQR, just meaning something ain't quite right. And that's all we want to know. And then we go, let's look at why it ain't quite right. And ask 3 to 5 why questions. If you ask a kid, say, I don't like soccer, I would say, why? And they go, I'm afraid the ball's going to hit me in the head. Why? Because I can't really tell where it is. Why? Well, my eyes aren't giving the right information. Okay, great. Let's deal with that. You may still not like soccer, but it's not because you can't perform or excel. So if you don't have confidence, you'll never get the competence. And then you get out on the soccer field, you're going to get better at soccer. But while you're getting better at soccer, you're getting better motor skills, you're getting visual skills, all those things that when you have, like, let me just live in a two-dimensional world, is, that's what these screeners are missing. That I said, I love kids with scrapes, bruises, bumps. They're bumped into a table, go, oh, that's closer than you thought, isn't it? I mean, how many times does the 2 and 3-year-old jump off the sofa onto the floor? They know intuitively, I need to judge space. I need to figure this out. You get in the parking lot, they're on the parking curb doing balancing. They know I need to understand midline awareness.
Is there an age where this development ends, where it peaks out and it's too late, or is this all across the lifespan?
Lifespan. That's one of the big. I have so many of my optometry peers go, well, I saw somebody the other day who had an eye that turned in, but they're 40, so I know you couldn't help. And it's like, oh my gosh, a great resource for neuroplasticity is the Sue Berry story, and it's Barry. But Sue Berry, she's a PhD, I believe it's neurobiology, college professor, married to an astronaut, super successful, but she couldn't catch a ball, she couldn't park her car, she had trouble going up and down steps. But she had an eye that turned in as a child. One eye turned in, or the other eye turned in. She never used her two eyes together. And so what the surgeon says, like, you have weak muscles, let's do muscle surgery. And it's, in 40 years, I've never seen a patient who has weak muscles. It's, if I can't play piano, I don't have weak fingers, I don't have the control I need of the fingers in order to play piano. And that's back to, again, things being learned. They learned the country road method. Instead of trying to line up those macula, laser point, precise, it's just easier to move one over to the side, because the muscles that move the eyes are roughly 100 times stronger than what they need to be. So it's not a weak muscle. Occasionally you'll have nerve damage, cranial nerve damage. And I go, I mean, less than 1% of the time, I'd say, yeah, it's probably not going to respond to therapy. But I can tell you that on the first visit, if there's an answer for you or not. But back to Sue Berry's story. So the doctor said, do muscle surgery. So they did. And as 2/3 of muscle surgeries need to be redone because it didn't address the cause of the problem, is my eyes don't know how to work together. Same thing happened to her. So her eye start drifting back in and taking turns. And surgeon said, you need to do another muscle surgery. And her parents said, why would I do that? The first one didn't work. So then she lived her life using one eye at a time. And then basically at 48-ish, I mean, they're off on the age, but she went and saw an optometrist who does vision therapy. And this optometrist basically said, let's get you in therapy and get your eyes working together. And Dr. Barry's like, I'm a college professor, researcher. I know I work in the brain. It's too late for me. I can't do that. And she goes, we do this with adults all the time. And Dr. Barry acknowledges she was still resistant. I don't think this will work, but she was academically curious. So she had to try it just for that alone. And so for the first time in her life, she had stereo vision. And so everybody said, Dr. Barry, write a book. So she did. And the book is called Fixing My Gaze. And the book Fixing My Gaze it's endorsed by 2 Nobel Prize winners. The New England Journal of Medicine did a book review, and their consensus, like, not only good book, good science. This is probably how we should do these things, but you don't have to be a PhD to understand. The book itself, the first third is like, she's so good at articulating what she's seeing and how she's feeling. But the first third of the book is like, here's my world when my eyes weren't working together. The middle third is like, here's my adult therapy experience. Final third is like, here's what it's like now that my eyes are working together. And she has multiple TED Talks. So if someone says, I don't want to read the whole book or do that, but a 15-minute TED Talk, just look up Sue Berry with A-R-R-Y TED Talk, and you'll see that. But it's a great, because everything she experienced in her own life, she's a researcher. She goes, I can't just blatantly put this. Maybe I'm just an outlier or whatever. So it's not that. So she did a lot of research. And so the last 20 to 30 pages of the book are bibliographies of peer-reviewed studies that are saying, look, this is not just you, Dr. Berry. This is what we're seeing with everybody. And so she's probably one of the, they call her Stereo Sue now because her name, and she's written another book, which is also very good, but I still Fixing My Gaze is just a great resource. And the TED Talk is, and a lot of it, you can even just go to YouTube and even just listen to it in the car. You don't have to really watch for a lot of what she's doing, but she's giving a great talk on that.
This information I'm kind of stunned by all of it, but it also
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And so there's people out there that are figuring this out, that are learning about this, not only how it works, but they're finding vision therapy and changing
Yes,
their lives.
exactly.
How do you see that developing? I mean, are, among pediatricians and optometrists and teachers, and
Mhm.
how is this awareness of the value of vision therapy and all these things that you're talking about, how is that
Yeah.
permeating out into the
Yeah.
the society?
The short answer is way too slowly. It's just but it is an instance of that's kind of my personal mission now. Like I said, I've sold my general practice so that I can focus just on growing therapy. And so we've started a new clinic in Somerset, Kentucky. We're down there. We have the one in Versailles, Kentucky, just outside of Lexington. And then once we get that up and going, we're going to open other clinics. And then the other thing we're doing is I've created a program that we should have up and going within a couple of months, where we can teach other optometrists how to do this. And so they can do that as well. But the other thing we're doing is we are just trying to get an online presence, so at least people know about this. And I never want this to sound uncaring or whatever, but I go, my life doesn't change if someone signs up for a therapy program, but their life can. So as the messenger, I go, don't blow the message. Don't blow the message. That's kind of my thing. And that's why I spend so much time educating patients one-on-one. But that's why I also want to say, now let's get the word out there. And if it's your thing, you think, hey, that sounds like something I would want to do. I said, great. If it's not your thing, I respect that as well, with that too. But it's just, I've never, in 40 years, I've never seen or heard anybody say anything negative or bad about vision therapy that was involved in vision therapy. It was always an outsider looking in. And kind of, I share briefly my story, but it's kind of like, in school, I was taught real doctors do glaucomas and cataracts and things like that. And so that's my first 6 years of practice. That's all I did. I did no vision therapy. And if you would have told me, came in as a patient and said, hey, I think I need to do vision therapy, I said, that's a waste of your time. I was 100% against it. I said, it's total quackery. And then I went to a conference. I was running an optometry practice, and we have no business training in school. And I was making mistake after mistake after mistake. And I go, and there was a conference over in Louisville about an hour away from us, and in the evening. And I thought, well, I got the evening free. I can go over there. And he said, you need optometrist? You need help running your business? And I go, yes, I do. And so I went to this conference, and I'm taking notes left and right. I go, I didn't know that. I didn't know. Oh, that's cool. I was learning so much about the business part of stuff that I should have been paying attention to. But then he said, and you should probably also consider adding vision therapy because it can help a lot of patients. And I vividly remember setting my pen down, probably crossed my arms, whatever. And I was kind of looking in the back to the back and say, there's a door out there. I could just sneak out real quickly. Nobody would know. And I get home earlier because I had patients the next morning as well. But then I thought that would be rude. So I stuck around. And he explained a couple things, and then put a graph up and just some things. I go, that totally makes sense to me. Whereas in school, we're taught here's an activity, here's an activity, here's an activity. Plus, you're taught vision therapy, yeah, do it if you want to, but here's the real what real eye doctors will focus on. And that's the structure, structure, structure. But then I went and trained under his, tutelage for 2 weeks, up in his clinic, and he held my hand for 2 years after that. These monthly calls, and I still remember being in the calls. Some of the calls were like, I can't do this. It's too hard. I'll never figure this out. But it's just he's kind of talked me off the ledge and got me going. And then just what's happened is that was in 1990 is when I started doing therapy. And then we just kept learning. I'm just this. I love this quest for knowledge, and so I was attending all these extra post grad classes and courses and credentialing and things like that. And then it was that was 1990. I still wouldn't consider light therapy or Syntonics until 2008. I go, that is weird. I couldn't wrap my head around that. And I went to the conference in 2008. I go, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And that's truly, I have all gizmos and gadgets at our office. But I said, I tell people all the time, I said, if you were to say I could only keep 4 things in my therapy program, I would keep light therapy, and I would have to really think about what the other 3 would be. But I want no question that would be one of the 4. That's how powerful it is for that. And so, it is. And then in around 2008, we added light therapy, and then all these other things we started. We added sports vision along the way. We started doing more of that, those kind of things. And then, like I said, it was late 2019, like November 2019. I sold my general practice because I always had a general optometry practice and a therapy clinic. They were side by side. And I said, I just don't have the bandwidth to keep doing the general practice and all that. So I sold that, focus on my whole mission and ministry now is to say, let's grow therapy. Let's let people know it's out there and available. And how can we do that? And I always say it's kind of like, I think of it like discipleship. I can, if I just did the patients myself, I can see 6 to 8 patients a day. But if I have therapists trained underneath me, so we have a whole training program on how to get our therapists to do that. And then I oversee, I'm the big picture guy, and they take care of the day to day. And so we have that in place so now I can see that many more. And then I've kind of realized the next step for us is we'd like to say, how do we get other doctors how to do this and teach their therapists to do those kind of things so we can just reach more people, help more people. And that's kind of my, if I would say, if that's my legacy, hopefully that's what it is. We've gotten this. So I want to just my role to be less and less and less, and let others take what we're doing, share what people have shared with me, get other people started with that. And then from there, they can just go, hey, take this farther than we are. And because there's so many smart people coming out with all these new things all the time, and the new knowledge and new equipment, new scenario. And there's so much more guesswork. Because when I got out of school, it really was the stuff we had was so rudimentary. You didn't have near the high tech stuff so it was kind of like, it was more objective and it was more art, less science. And I think those are both important. So I love the data points, so I can sit here and see how are we doing. But at the end of the day, I'm more interested. How's your world? What ADLs, your activities of daily living? How's that being impacted? Is the number one thing to shoot for.
Well, it's a good thing you found this area because as you describe it, it just seems intuitively, it makes sense. It's obviously important. You're very experienced and extremely knowledgeable and passionate about it. It would be fun to have you on again to talk more about the technology as well. I mean, I can imagine a series of episodes because there's so much information here. We have listeners all over. Some of them may be in Kentucky, but most of them probably are not. So you had mentioned light therapy and some other books that I'm going to try to include in the show notes. But for other people who are listening, parents, teachers, maybe providers, what can you offer them in terms of some next steps? It sounds like get your kids outside more. What else do you think?
100%. It's just I always tell I kind of just created a list like here's some vision building activities and they're random. I just but the common thread through everything that's going to build vision is kind of two things. It's multi-sensory. You don't just look. If you put like I'll kind of put here if you put this pin in front of a 1-year-old, they're going to reach and grab, reach and grab, reach and grab. Then they're going to go, oh, there's the pin. Their hands are leading their vision at that point. The three, they're going, oh, their eyes are leading their hands right to the pen. So a 1-year-old colors on the table, off the paper onto the table. 2-year-old stays on the paper. 3-year-old stays in their lines. So they're touching, feeling, moving, and initially touch is leading, but then you integrate those and really fine motor skills as visual motor integration, getting those two things working together, those two sensory skills. So having people touch, move, feel, which is again, you're going to do outdoors. So if you just get them outdoors, all that's kind of taken care of itself, with that. But then the outdoors may not do the fine motor. So also color, cut, put, golf tees into pegboard, or just, color in the lines, whatever, make the less, more detail. But it's multi-sensory and three-dimensional off the screens and off there. I mean, it's just an instant. You talked about the screens earlier, and that's one of the things too. If you look, many of the leaders of social media, they won't let their kids have tablets or phones till later because they know the psychology, the addictive nature. They're intentionally trying to make them addictive. And then from a vision standpoint, the glowing screen is not what we're not made to really see that glowing screen, so that creates more visual stress because your pupil of your eye is going to get smaller bigger as the screen's fluctuating on there too, so it creates there. And that's the thing too, that's another thing we do. We'll video and then measure like pupil response. We can do with heart rate variability, and we can measure like with these kids what percentage of their system, their autonomic system, is in fight or flight or rest and digest. And we talked about syntonics. I talked about it goes to the pineal gland. It also has a pathway to the hypothalamus, which controls that autonomic nervous system. So you can basically, through light therapy, take down, let's cut the sympathetic or cut the parasympathetic. What do we need to do? Because there's nothing wrong being a little high, a little low, but when they're excessive, you can create that calm scenario through light therapy. I start every clinic morning, I start with light therapy. I
We
mean, it's just
we've had some clients that kiddos who had anxiety who completed some light therapy and saw huge
awesome.
reductions in their
Love that.
anxiety.
Yeah. The other thing is breathing. That's the other thing. I think, I'm sure you guys have all sorts of the breathing techniques, but I mean, there was a study this last March, breathing just for 5 in, 5 out through your nose, 10 times, did that 3 times a day. So, 3 minutes total, 3 minutes total, 1 minute, 3 times a day. Doing that actually lowered eye pressure for glaucoma treatment. So it's just an instance of, there's so much information now about breath work and what it can do. And the nice thing, there's no risk, no danger, with that too. And so it's just letting kids, it's great to give these kids these coping skills. If tests freak them out or whatever, well, okay, let's do this. Because what happens to your visual system, if you go to the eye doctor Monday morning, you have great peripheral vision, see off to the side wonderfully. Monday afternoon, you're in the backyard getting chased by a mean dog. We're all going to go tunnel vision. And so when that sympathetic system goes up, our visual system claps. And then you don't have that peripheral vision to guide you. It's your peripheral vision that's controlling eye pointing, moving, tracking. And then you're doing the schoolwork, which requires excessive, precise eye tracking. And they're in this freak out mode. And they get in that tunnel vision or focal lock. So it just blows my mind how everything's connected to everything. And that's why I just think we'll never be smart enough to fully understand that. And that's why, and I appreciate the opportunity to let people know, hey, hopefully this helps some people somewhere with that too. And from our perspective, like I said, we do have people coming in from different areas, just say, hey, I want to know what's going on. What about this? And we can do testing, and we get reports, and get a 6 or 8 page report on here's how things are doing. And then we have some programs that we can do through telehealth or farther away. But it is an instance sometimes too. We say, hey, here's somebody who's really great, who's just not that far from you. So we kind of see what's the best logistical scenario for patients, with that too. Then kind of but they at least know what their options are. Like, and it is, I hear there's not a day goes by in my world. They go, how come we didn't know this before? I wish we'd have known this 10 years ago. And it breaks my heart. I see some of these brain injury 5 and 10 years ago, they had a car accident, stroke, whatever, and they've just been. They said no. They said there's nothing else you can do, and they're just sitting at home in a dark room, maybe watching a little TV, but just kind of listening to music, doing whatever. And it's just like, and literally come in, and then they're back to work. I remember the first brain injury patient I ever saw. His mother said, "Would you work with him?" And I said, "I don't know if I could help him. Some people in my field are doing brain injury. I've never done that." She said, "Would you try?" And I said, "As long as you know I'm not promising anything." So we did. And after 10 or 12 years of OT and PT, he had been in a car wreck. He was coming into our office day one on a walker. We worked with him. A year later, he wasn't even using a cane. And I would have never said in optometry, we're going to be dealing with that. I keep some of his test results in my exam room as a reminder to me. I did not know what I was doing, to be blunt. I mean, but it didn't matter. I got his brain the information it needed, and his brain knew how to wire itself. And I think that's one of the biggest problems in healthcare. Our egos go, "Oh, I don't know an answer, and that can't be there." It's like, the body's, I said, I believe in miracles. I think the brain's a miracle. You give it half a chance. The body's a miracle. Give it half a chance. And just, the other thing is critically important is, diet, exercise, and sleep, without question. Those are things. And it's just, obviously, we got a lot of problems with our food supplies, just, more
Yep.
toxic than it used to be. And
It seems like a lot of this is very natural and going back to basics. And as you said, you're just taking off the heavy shoe. So you're letting the body develop,
yeah,
letting the body heal, letting the body know do what it wants to
absolutely.
do.
Yeah. And they learn those skills that they need. Because again, just like I said, you'll learn to walk and talk when you're born. That, because that's helpful. But when all you do is sit and play video games, you don't understand about your body. And there's kind of four sensory circles we work in. It's body awareness. Where am I? Where's midline? Where are we doing? Like I said, because as adults, our body supports our head supports our visual system, and our eyes tell us about the world out here. But you can't make an eye move without sending a message to your body. You can't make a body move without sending a message to your visual system. They're constantly talking through that ambient visual system. And that's something I didn't tell you. Here's an example I give of how focal and ambient. I said we get a clear image, we process. There's focal and there's ambient processing. So patients, when they come to our office, I said, you just drove here. Here's an example of this. So driving here, in a tenth, light hits your eye, in a tenth of a second, your ambient vision will process what's going on. It will say, I see there's 6 cars out here, but I can tell 3 are parked, 2 are going our direction, one's coming from a side street. And focal vision takes a half a second to process. So your ambient tells your focal vision, I just need you to watch the side street. And so I said, what did you see when you're driving? And you would have said, oh, a black truck coming from the side street. That's what you're consciously aware of. That's your focal vision, what you're focusing on. But hitting your eyes are those other cars and the trees and the clouds, pedestrians, and the ambient filters that out for us. And so when it's filtering is great, like a lot of the ADHD type symptoms, it's like shiny, 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 because you're not filtering. Those people are super light sensitive. They can't filter out the glare. Your vision and hearing both work on a signal to noise ratio. If I'm talking to you like this at a rock concert, you couldn't hear a thing that I was saying because the noise exceeds the signal. And I use an example of a kid clicking a pen in class. You and I could be sitting side by side, and you go, "Great lecture." I couldn't even hear that kid clicking a pen, and you go, "What kid?" You filtered it out without even spending any brain dimes. So you go, "I'm comfortable here. I'm focusing. I'm attentive to that." Otherwise, you have all these like fingers pokes all the time. It's just you can't ignore, and it's horrible for these kids. That's what the brain injury. That's really what happens. They can't filter it all, so they can't go to busy places. Noise they startle, and they're in that fight or flight constantly.
There's so many pieces to this, and all those behaviors that you describe, we hear those all the time with
Yeah.
the neurodevelopmental evaluation
Hmm.
process, and we see pieces of this. Of course, we don't assess what you do, and
No,
so,
that's
but we'll see these little characteristics. You'll see it in
right.
scores and behaviors and parent report, and then then the referrals are the
Yeah.
next piece. So for listeners, whether they be parents or pediatricians or optometrists wanting
Hmm.
to know
Hmm.
or interested in maybe the training that you offer,
Yeah.
how can people find you?
Yeah, well, like I said, we're Neuro-Visual Performance Institute in Versailles, Kentucky. Our direct line I know is 859 879 gosh, 7, 9. I think verify that. I'm pretty sure of that too. But that Allie has all of our email points, and then we are. If you just look up Neuro-Visual Performance Institute, and you'll see us. And we have just started doing videos, kind of the things we're talking about here. But we're going to be on Instagram, we're Snapchat, we're on YouTube, and I'm personally focusing more on YouTube because I can give more in depth. But I go, here's a 2-minute video on focal and ambient. Here's a 2-minute video on skills you need for reading. So there's a lot of that information, and we're adding to that weekly, if not daily, with that too. And so, including patient testimonials, we have thousands of written testimonials over the years, but we're now starting to do video testimonials. So we'll be able to upload some of those. They're going to be doing we're going to be adding a lot more of those. So you can hear patients tell their own story, with that too.
I'll make sure to include those links to your website as well as to the YouTube in the show notes. I don't want to overwhelm your phones, but our listeners who are interested in learning more, are they free to just reach out and kind of find out?
Absolutely. That's the thing. I mean, our mission statement is we're here to serve. How can we help? That's what I said too. And so it's just an instance of that'd be a nice problem to have. If the phones are overwhelmed, say, good, we can get a lot of people, a lot of help, whether it be with us or with someone closer to their area with that too. We're glad to be a navigator for the patient, or potentially, help them ourselves if that's something they wanted to do. And so we're always available for that. It's just the biggest thing we have. We aren't set up to say, let me answer your specific questions about this and this and this. We're kind of almost need to do an evaluation, because everything else we're guesswork. We really wouldn't know. And it is an instance of one of the things that, like in your work and anybody who works with kids, COVD is College of Optometrists and Vision Development. They're kind of rebranding to Optometric Vision Development Rehab Association, OVDRA. But if you look COVD, they basically have a quality of life survey that is very accurate, very precise. It's about 24 questions. It says, does this happen? Never, sometimes, often, always. And if you have trouble finding that, you can, let Allie, she can send you one along with a scoring sheet for that as well. But that's so precise. If I look at if you have a score of 15 or higher, I may want to consider. If you're 24 or higher, it's like you're going to need therapy. But I have patients coming out time scores of 68, 70, 80, that too. And it's like, I know they're going to need therapy, but we still want to do the testing to see what actually does your therapy look like. And we always do things one-on-one. I think that's critically important. So we don't work and frustrate, we don't bore. And so that's all of our programs. And, in a perfect world, we have patients come to the office once a week, and to create pathways in the brain. If you go more than 3 days without practicing, the brain saying, I'm not going to create a pathway. So the key to getting better is doing home activities. Like I said, we're coaches. We can't magically fix things, but if you'll follow the process, again, I'm 99% certain you'll improve those skills. And when those skills are improved, you go, life's easier. When the vision system is working, it assists. When it's not, it gets in the way. And that's really kind of what we want to do, is get there. It's critical. And child development, vision is so critical in child development, but it's also critical for adult performance as well. And just getting your work done quicker and faster, and hopefully rising up the ranks because you're excelling at your workplace with that too, and not struggling.
This is a phenomenal conversation. This is definitely one of those I'm going to have to go back and listen to a couple times at least, because there was so much information that I just, and so much of it was new. I'd never even heard this. So I'm going to try to highlight some of this in the show notes, but if you're able or willing to come back on at some point and talk.
Absolutely. I realize, I tell everybody, we have things at the end. I give patients, and when I'm done with patients, I give them, here's resources. You could take a breath and kind of get this, because I've heard many times, it's like drinking from a fire hose. And I go, I get it. I talk fast, I bounce around, and I was able to, I apologize to those who are like, whoa, slow down, just kind of turn the speed down. I always tell people going on YouTube, whatever, just, playback speed about half speed, and they'll be normal.
This information is most of it is so new, and I think fresh for most listeners, myself included, but it's also so interesting, and it makes, I just say it just makes sense intuitively. It clicks with, I think, what we know to be true. So,
well, that's what we hear, and I appreciate you saying it too, because it is. It's hard for me, having lived in this world for 40 years. You kind of go, what's new? It's not new to me, so it doesn't seem new. And that's kind of what I've just realized over the last probably 4 to 5 years, is what we're doing is way more unique than I realized. I just was hanging around smart people who shared stuff with me, and we just tried that. We kind of figured it out, and so and I realized, I know we're getting as good or better outcomes than anybody out there, with that too. And it's just I'm just the mediary with that too. With that.
Well, you're clearly doing good work and
Well,
important
thank
work.
you.
So,
Thank you.
before we sign off, is there anything
Yeah.
else that you wanted to mention? I'll just leave you with the last word.
No, like I said, thanks for the opportunity with that too. And I just say, if you have a chance, definitely finding what we do is called behavioral optometry. It's called developmental optometry. It's called vision therapy. We kind of go the next step is what I call neuro-visual performance training, which then we really coordinate everything from eyes, brain, body, mind. We work at all four of those areas simultaneously, and that's why we're getting fast results than when I was just doing straight up vision therapy. But I'm still a fan of straight up vision therapy. That's very good. And if that's what you have access to, get that. It's going to be a step in the right direction. For a lot of people, like that's where I want to be. But there are, like in any field, you're going to find people, hey, we can go a step further if you want to. But again, the big thing to look for is if you know you're not reaching your potential, I can almost guarantee there's a visual skills deficit somewhere along the line, and that is fixable. It's just not a wave of a magic wand. If you're willing to put the work in, one of my favorite quotes is, the only place success will ever come before work is in the dictionary. That's a Vince Lombardi quote. I just think, but if you'll put the work in, the success will come. And that's the big message for everybody, is finding the right person, not necessarily in the vision world, but in other worlds as well, because there's a lot of smart people out there who are doing it for the right reasons, and they can provide a lot of help for you. And I appreciate the service you're providing, just opportunity for people to come out and spread the word, so at least others know that these are options for them.
You offered a perfect takeaway right there at the end, that visual issues are driving a problem at some level. If somebody's experiencing a struggle, there's probably a vision related issue. And if you put in the work and it's the right kind of work, you're going to see some improvement. So that's fantastic. Well, Dr. Richard Graebe, Neuro-Visual Performance Institute in Versailles, Kentucky, thank you very, very much for coming on. This was a phenomenal conversation, just overwhelming with information. We really appreciate it, and I look forward to having you back on again at some point.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. That's it from us today. As always, you can find more information as well as resources on our website, individualmatters.org. We hope you'll join us at the next podcast, where we'll continue to explore topics around successful living, learning and education, and child development, and share ways to help you live a more positive and fulfilling life.
The information is not intended to provide or serve as medical, clinical, or educational advice. Individual Matters is not responsible for the accuracy of guest statements. All information should be validated independently. Please consult with your doctor, mental health provider, attorney, or other appropriate professionals before making any personal decisions for yourself or those in your care.